As you already know, the gravitational pull of Sun and Moon are important in tide generation. However, also the configuration of the oceans and coastlines will have a significant effect on tides' behavior. So, the theoretical tide described in the previous session is not exactly real. In theory, most areas of the Earth should experience 2 equally proportional high tides and 2 low tides during a lunar day. However, in practice, different depths, sizes, and shapes of ocean basins modify the tides. With this, the tide wave is unable to move freely around the globe. These tides establish complex patterns within each ocean basin. 3 different types of tides can be found on Earth. These are the semidiurnal pattern, the diurnal pattern, and the mixed tidal pattern. This image shows the geographical distribution of these patterns. As you may remember, the tide range can be considered as microtidal if is less than 2 meters, can be mesotidal if is between 2 to 4 meters, can be macrotidal if is between 4 to 8 meters, and megatidal if it's bigger than 8 meters. In general, it is tide range rather than tide type that is most important in disciplines such as sandy beach ecology and also in coastal engineering. But before we continue, it's important to learn a list of terms related to tides in order to the correct understanding of these patterns. One of the most important is the lunar day or tidal day. Do you remember it? Unlike a 24-hour solar day, a lunar day lasts 24 hours and 50 minutes. This occurs because the moon revolves around the Earth in the same direction that the Earth is rotating on its axis. Therefore, it takes the Earth an extra 50 minutes to catch up to the moon. Since the Earth rotates through 2 tidal bulges every lunar day, we experience 2 high and 2 low tides every 24 hours and 50 minutes. And is precisely within a lunar day where the tidal patterns take place. Other terms related to the tidal waveform of equally importance are the high tide. High tide is when water advances to its furthest extent onto the shoreline, the maximum level of tidal height. The low tide is when tide level recedes to its furthest extent. This is the lowest point of tidal height. Then the tidal period. This is the time transcurred between 2 consecutive high tides or 2 consecutive low tides. The tidal range is the difference in height between the high tide and the low tide. Tidal range can change during neap and spring tides. We will learn about neap and spring tides in this session. Finally, the tidal amplitude. The amplitude is 1/2 of the tidal range. It's time to learn about the tidal patterns. As we mentioned before, depending on the number and relative tidal heights, there are 3 primary patterns for tides. Diurnal tides. An area has a diurnal tidal cycle if it experiences 1 high and 1 low tide every lunar day. The term diurnal refers to a daily occurrence. So, a situation where there is only 1 complete tidal cycle per day is considered a diurnal tide. Diurnal tides are common in the Gulf of Mexico, along the west coast of Alaska, and in parts of Southeast Asia. Semidiurnal tides. An area has a semidiurnal tidal cycle if it experiences 2 high and 2 low tides of approximately equal size every lunar day. Semidiurnal means half of a day. 1 tidal cycle takes half of a day. Therefore, there are 2 complete cycles per day. The semidiurnal tides are common along the east coasts of North America and Australia, the west coast of Africa, and most of Europe. Finally, mixed tides. Similar to semidiurnal tides, an area has a mixed semidiurnal tidal cycle if it experiences 2 high and 2 low tides of different size every lunar day. Areas with a mixed tidal cycle can be found alongside the west coast of the USA, in parts of Australia and in Southeast Asia. The mixed pattern can have diurnal or semidiurnal dominance. If we graph the tidal behavior over a month, we can identify these variations. Observe the frequency of the oscillations and how the tidal amplitude varies in every case. In this image we can see the tide in Boston, Massachusetts, which shows a semidiurnal pattern. The tide in San Francisco, California, displays a mixed tidal pattern. The tide in Galveston, Texas, shows a mixed tide with a strong diurnal tendency. The tide in Pakhoi, China, exhibits a diurnal pattern.